Now, Karl Rove, former Deputy Chief of Staff to President George W. Bush, Byron York, Chief Political Correspondent for the Washington Examiner, and Richard Fowler, Senior Fellow at the New Leaders Council, all are Fox News contributors. Gentlemen, welcome. Thanks for being here. I think that, a lot of people who have watched this closely over the last few weeks are getting around to the realization that so much of what was different this time obviously stemmed from the mail-in voting, which was completely unprecedented. We never dealt with anything like this in our country. And also a lot of rules that were changed in the weeks and months leading up to the election in terms of what made a ballot allowable and what made a ballot disallowable. I mean, most of us, when we got our mail-in ballot, really careful. You got to sign one side. You've got to sign the other. You have to make sure that you check all of the boxes on the back in order for it to count. Karl, when you listen to those strong words from Newt Gingrich, is he right? Do you agree?
Well, first of all, I'm involved in this raising money for the Georgia Battleground Fund to help these candidates. But yes, there are lots of things that need to be clarified. State law requires that the signature on your ballot match the signature on your registration card. And the consent decree gave the ability to match it to any signature that you might have on file. That's in violation of the state law. There's a requirement that, there are these boxes at which you can, 800 of them, I believe the number is, where you can drop off your ballot. Well, there's video on those boxes, but in order for that video to matter, the campaigns have to have ready and available access to it in real time. It needs to be live streamed or made available to them so that they can monitor those boxes. And if those boxes, if some shenanigan goes on, there's no ballot harvesting allowed in Georgia. So if somebody shows up and shoves a bunch of ballots in there, there has to be a way to take those ballots, segment them, put them aside, make extra checks, and go after whoever harvested those ballots and dropped them in there. And if the camera goes down, put those ballots that are accepted in that box during the period that the camera's down need to be segregated. And again, they need to be carefully looked at to make certain that they're legal. But yeah, there are lots of things that have to be resolved, and guidance has to be uniform. Lots of counties in Georgia do match the signature on the ballot to the signature on the registration card, but other counties had decided that they were going to do something else. So there needs to be a uniform standard, otherwise we're violating the 14th Amendment.
Yeah. Richard, that's the law, that there's no ballot harvesting in Georgia. So it does seem very important that if one person is putting in more than one ballot in a box, that would be something that would need to be double checked, right? So the laws have been loosened to the point where there's a lot of questions. And I think it ends up hurting both sides of the equation down the road at some point. Doesn't it behoove us to make sure that these things are fixed?
Listen, I think we need to do everything in our power to make sure that every American has a chance to cast their ballot. We have to also acknowledge that we're voting during a global pandemic, and during that pandemic, there's a lot of Americans who might not be able to drop their ballot off. How about if you're an immunocompromised 89-year-old and you can't leave your home and you need to drop your ballot off? And so we've got to do everything in our power to ensure that
Richard, you can mail your ballot.
Yeah,
you can put your ballot in the mail.
I did not interrupt you, Karl. I did not interrupt you.
It's a valid point, Richard. So, tell me another person who wouldn't be able to mail the ballot. I mean, what possible circumstance would you be in that you couldn't individually mail your ballot from your house and put it in the post office, in the mailbox?
You absolutely can mail your ballot, but once again, what Karl was trying to point out and what the president's tried to do over the past couple of months is sort of disparage the Georgia voting system. But after 3 and 4 recounts, what we found here is that there is no voter fraud. No voter fraud has been done. No voters took advantage of the system, and the system worked exactly as it should work. And as a result, Joe Biden won this election. And while Republicans have a voter registration advantage in Georgia, the reason why Joe Biden won this election, the reason why Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff have a chance to win this election is because of the work of black women in the state of Georgia, like Stacey Abrams, like Keisha Lance Bottoms, who are working to register voters and working to energize African Americans in the Atlanta suburbs to turn out and vote. And that's what's going to happen on January 5th. Once again, these women are going to mobilize voters, and they're going to outvote Republicans.
Everybody agrees that mobilizing voters is a is an absolutely American thing to do. But the question is whether or not there is anything happening that shouldn't be happening, because that's also a very American question. Karl, quick thought from Karl, and then I want to get Byron in here, because I know you've got something to say.
Talking about voter registration, a New York Times columnist said, violate the law by moving to Georgia, registering to vote for the two Georgia Democrats, and then go back home. Andrew Yang said, I'm going to go to Georgia and register. Georgia law requires that any voter has to have an intention. It has to have the intention of being a permanent resident of the state. And if you go there just to vote in the election, it's a violation, a felony violation. So we got to have some protections on that.
But those were just opinion authors making a point.
Let's make sure. Let's make 100% sure, Richard.
Let's make 100% sure. National candidates saying, I'm going to violate the law by committing a felony. We don't need to worry about Tom Friedman. You're right,
presidential candidate.
Absolutely right. Don't need to worry about
that. All right, guys, I'm going to let me let Byron in here. Byron, you're covering this Georgia election as well. There was a lot of discussion about President Trump's appearance on Saturday night. Was he just talking about his own election, or was he really helping these two candidates? What do you say?
Well, we heard the story going in, which was that the president would go down there, he would rant about the presidential election, he would undermine the candidacies of David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler. And actually, he didn't so much. He did, of course, talk about the presidential election, because that's what he does. But he spent an enormous amount of time talking about the election and urging Georgians to get out and vote. He said it over and over and over again. There was a huge sign in back of him that said, request your absentee ballot right now. He talked about, urged people to get mail-in ballots and to mail them in immediately. And also, there are a couple of lawyers, Sidney Powell and Lynn Wood, who have filed lawsuits on behalf of Trump, but have also urged Georgia voters not to vote in the runoff because they say it won't be secure. And President Trump very specifically said, no, no, no. Do not do that. You have to vote. So I think that he really did produce for Loeffler and Perdue in this visit.
And he was so emphatic about that he's actually going to go back and do it again, is being reported tonight, that he will head back to Georgia to continue to try to make that point. So, Karl, it says there's a news story that GOP lawmakers in Georgia are proposing rule changes before January 5th that would require a photo ID for ballots cast by mail. And Democrats are pushing back against that. I'm not even sure how that would work exactly, but is that going to be a reality?
Well, I think that's going to be difficult to do because, one of the things that we learned in Bush v. Gore was that you have to operate under the rules in effect when people vote. And we're already voting in Georgia. People are, voting by mail. Next Monday, they'll start voting in person. And so I think that's going to be difficult to do, to change the rules. I do think, though, that uniform guidance from the State Board of Elections on what is acceptable behavior by each of the 159 counties is a way to get some of these things resolved. And my understanding is the Republican effort is aimed at doing exactly that, because different counties interpret things and do things in a different way. And that really is raising a 14th Amendment issue of equitable treatment of people in different counties. So State Board of Elections resolving whatever issues in which there's already statutory authority for them to act is probably a better way to go.
Yeah. Richard, let me ask you the last question, because I'm about to go to Ken Starr here. Raphael Warnock, basically said that he wouldn't really give his answer on whether or not he would vote for court packing if he's a senator. Do you think that's a problematic moment for him?
No, not at all, because I think the voters in Georgia are more concerned with their top issue is COVID-19. So he's going to continue to focus on that. And I don't think court packing is going to come up anytime in the near future, because we really don't know the balance of the Senate quite yet. So I think his answer was fair, and it was the right answer.
All right. We got to leave it there. Thank you very much, Byron York and Richard Fowler and Karl Rove. Good to see you all tonight. Thank you.